All of us have had the experience of having to present our driver's license, passport, or some other document when asked to show our identification. Usually, this will be while in line at a store or when being pulled over by a police officer. Definitely not the ideal times for serious contemplation. But nevertheless, it will sometimes strike me how ironic it is that these little cards are used to verify our entire identity. After all, they usually contain only the bare bones of age, address, appearance, and signature. While these may be the only things that are of interest to a cashier when you're writing a check, they're certainly not the totality of who we are. I'll give you another example. Say you're at a party and are introduced to several people you don't know. If you have only a moment to talk to someone, what's the first and maybe only thing you're likely to find out? The people you meet will probably not present their driver's license, but what they will offer is just as confining. They'll tell you what they do for a living. Now, I'm not saying any of this is necessarily bad. That you're a warm and sensitive human being isn't going to be of any use to the supermarket if your check bounces. And if you find out more about someone at a party or gathering than that he's a mechanic or a college professor, it would take all night and you wouldn't get to meet anyone else. But unfortunately, what these practices do is falsely confirm something we tend to do anyway. We reduce who we are into what we do or a few other vital statistics. You might be wondering what who you are has to do with your ultimate destiny, but I'll tell you now that discovering your true inner self, your true identity, is one of the most vitally important steps you can take toward lasting happiness and success. Because it will be through transforming your identity, not becoming something you're not, but by changing the way you frame who you are, that you will discover happiness and reach your ultimate destiny. You see, we often limit our identity by limiting the way we define it. Sometimes the way we identify ourselves is so disempowering that we're actually setting ourselves up to fail before we take any action at all. It's bad enough when we belittle ourselves by saying things like, "Oh, I'm just a volunteer," or "I'm just a teacher." It's amazing that one little word like just, one tiny syllable we say without even thinking, can be so limiting to our identities and our lives. To begin with, nobody is just anything. It's time to start thinking of ourselves as more than just. Each person is so unique and important that nobody else can contribute exactly what they can to the world. Nobody else can take your place or think your thoughts. Nobody else can be you. And no matter how hard you try, you can't be anyone else. That may sound a bit elementary, but actually it's one of the most profound truths about ourselves, and certainly it should be one of the most inspiring. Our individuality is our most important gift, but it's often one of the least appreciated. In a world where we willingly identify ourselves by what shoes we wear and by whether they're the same shoes that everyone else is wearing, individuality is sadly a dying art. Belittling ourselves by being just this or just that is unfortunate, but many of us limit our identities in an even more harmful way by identifying ourselves by our weaknesses. This goes far beyond thinking, "I'm not any good at math." Someone who identifies himself as unattractive and unpopular, regardless of the truth of those statements, will actually find some way of making that identity a reality. Someone who thinks of herself as a failure will always fail. And once these identities become self-fulfilling, the individual is primed to identify with more and more weaknesses and negative attributes, even inventing them out of thin air if necessary. The good news, of course, is that our identities can work for us a lot more easily than they can work against us. Identifying ourselves with more positive and productive concepts can also become self-fulfilling prophecies in a surprisingly short amount of time. So because of our inherent abilities to either empower or disempower ourselves by the way we frame aspects of our identities, it's a good idea to objectively examine what we have to work with. In this session, we're first going to take a good hard look at the concept of identity, then at your own unique identity, and then at ways you can enhance and expand your identity in a way that will make your ultimate destiny a happy reality.